My name is Frances Kilbane. Most people call me Frankie. I am 31 years old, and I am an orthodontist, one of 6 residents the Ohio State program accepted out of 214 applicants the year I applied. On a Tuesday morning in September at 6:40, my father called me to tell me what I owed. "Your sister's wedding comes to $58,000, he said. "You're the one with the doctor money. You'll cover it. And if you won't, I'll take the tuition fund apart myself." Family signs for family, Francis. He said it the way a man reads a bill out loud. Flat. Certain. Already decided. He was right that he could reach the money. He was wrong about almost everything else, and he had no idea where I had been for the last 11 days. Welcome to my channel, where ordinary people face impossible family moments and walk out with their dignity intact. If you have ever been the useful child instead of the loved one, the one they call when something needs paying and never when something needs celebrating, this story is for you. If that sounds familiar, subscribe and stay with me. But let me back up. I grew up in Belcross, Ohio, a town of 2,900 people in Pickaway County, 42 miles south of Columbus. 2 stoplights, a grain elevator, a Methodist church, and a Catholic one that competed at festival season over whose fried chicken dinner was better. The tool and die plant on Sawmill Road employed 340 people when I was small. It closed in 2011. In 2018, somebody bought the shell of it, sandblasted the brick, hung Edison bulbs from the crane rails, and called it the Ironworks. Now you can get a flight of beer where my father used to run second shift. That building matters later. Hold on to it. In our house there were 3 children and 2 categories. Blythe was the event. I was the collateral. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it is the most accurate word. Collateral is a thing of value that sits quietly and secures somebody else's borrowing. That is exactly what I was, from about the age of 9, and everyone in the house understood the arrangement without anyone ever saying it aloud. Blythe is 3 years younger than me. She is our mother's coloring and our father's confidence, and from the time she was a toddler, she could walk into a room and rearrange it around herself. In 2006, she was cast as a woodland creature in the 3rd grade play, with no lines, and my father took 61 photographs. That same spring I placed first in the Pickaway County Spelling Bee. My mother, Patrice, who has apologized to me exactly once in my life, and it was for a casserole, wrote the date on the kitchen calendar and then wrote over it because Blythe had a dress fitting. I have a younger brother too, Everett. He was born when I was 12, and by the time he could talk the categories were already set, so he mostly learned to stay out of the way. He is not a villain in this. Remember him. My grandmother is where the money in this story begins. Ada Kilbane lived on Vine Street in a house with a screened porch and a kitchen that smelled like scorched coffee. She kept a blue chock-full-o'-nuts tin on the shelf above the stove, and starting the year I was born, she put $40 into it on the 1st of every month. Not for Blythe. Not for Everett. For me. She told me once, when I was 8 and helping her snap beans, that she had watched my mother stop halfway through nursing school in 1984, and she was not going to watch it happen twice in one family. In 2004, the bank teller talked her into something better than a coffee tin. She opened an account with Ohio's 529 plan, College Advantage, the state's own program, and she named me as the beneficiary. She kept putting money in it until her hands got bad. She kept the tin too. She just used it to hold the paper statements, folded into thirds, with the dates written on the outside in pencil. Grandma Ada died in March of 2019. She was 88. At the funeral lunch in the church basement, over ham loaf and scalloped potatoes, my father told an aunt that he would be handling Ada's affairs. He was. That is not a crime. A 529 account has an owner and a beneficiary, and they are not the same person. Ada was the owner. I was the beneficiary. When Ada died, the successor owner she had listed years earlier, her son, my father, Roland Kilbane, became the owner of the account. I want to be precise about this, because it is the hinge everything else turns on. The beneficiary of a 529 plan does not own the money. Not $1 of it. The owner does. The owner can change the beneficiary to another family member. The owner can withdraw the money for any reason he likes. The beneficiary gets a name on a line and nothing else. My father learned that in 2019. He waited 7 years to use it. Here is what being collateral looked like in numbers, because numbers are the only part of my childhood nobody has ever tried to talk me out of. In 2013, my senior year at Belcross High, I qualified for the state science fair in Columbus with a project on nitrate runoff in the Scioto watershed. The judging was on a Saturday in March. Blythe had a dance showcase in Circleville the same afternoon. My mother said, without any apparent difficulty, "Well, Blythe's is a whole production." I took the school van with my chemistry teacher, Mr. Tibbetts, and his wife, and I placed second in my division, and Mrs. Tibbetts bought me a milkshake on the way home so there would be something to market. In 2015, I worked 30 hours a week as a dental assistant at a general practice in Circleville while I finished my prerequisites. I gave my parents $500 a month for room and board. I have the deposit slips. That fall my transmission went out, and I asked my father if he could help with the repair, which quoted at $840. He told me a job that couldn't cover its own car wasn't much of a job. 11 weeks later, they bought Blythe a used Jeep Liberty for $8,400 because she had gotten a receptionist position in Grove City and needed something reliable. In 2018, I asked my parents to come to my white coat ceremony at the dental school in Columbus. It is a small thing. You wear a short coat and somebody older puts a longer one over it, and everyone claps, and it takes 40 minutes. My father said they'd be there. On the morning of, my mother texted that the transmission on Blythe's Jeep had gone out and Dad had to go get her. The seats they were supposed to sit in were in row 6. I could see them from the stage the whole time. And in 2021, my father co-signed my private student loans. I need you to understand how that happened, because it is not the way he told it at Thanksgiving for the next 5 years. Dental school cost what dental school costs. I had federal loans for $164,000, which required no cosigner and no permission from anybody. The gap tuition and fees the federal limits didn't reach came to $148,000 in private loans through a lender called Keystone Educational Finance. Private lenders want a cosigner for a 25-year-old with no income. Mine did. I asked my father. He took 2 days. Then he came to the kitchen table with his reading glasses pushed up on his head, and he signed his name on the cosigner line, and he capped the pen, and he said the sentence he would say to me at least a dozen times over the next 5 years. Family signs for family. He meant it warmly that night. I believed he meant it warmly. I remember being so grateful my eyes stung, and I remember thinking, in a small ugly corner of my head, that maybe this was the year the accounting between us finally evened out. What I did not understand at 26 is that in my father's mind, a signature is not a favor. It is a lien. He did not think he had helped me borrow $312,000. He thought he had bought a share of whatever I became. He was not always that man. I owe the record this much. When the plant closed in 2011, he brought home his brass badge, number 118, and put it in a drawer, and he did not talk about it for a year. He had run that second shift for 19 years. And in the winter of 2012, when I was 17 and had left my retainer in a napkin at a basketball game in Chillicothe, he drove 71 miles round trip on ice at 11 at night and found it in a trash barrel under the bleachers, and handed it to me in the truck without a word about what it cost him. I think about that more than I want to. There was a man in there once who understood that a small plastic thing could matter to somebody because it was hers. He got smaller as the years went on. Not meaner. Smaller. And the smaller he got, the more he needed one of his children to be a triumph and one of his children to be a resource. 2 more things you need to know before the wedding. The first is my aunt. Constance Kilbane, Connie, is my father's older sister, 67 years old, a retired school nurse who worked 34 years in the Belcross district and knows every family in that county down to the middle names. Aunt Connie was at the spelling bee. Aunt Connie was at the white coat ceremony in row 6, in the seat my parents didn't use. She has never once in my life asked me for anything. The second is what I do for a living and why it matters. Orthodontics is not a dramatic specialty. It is a slow one. You look at a set of records, photographs, a panoramic film, a cephalometric tracing, a scan, and you build a plan that takes 22 months, and then you hold the line on that plan while a teenager who hates you tries to negotiate it down every 6 weeks. I say no roughly 40 times a day. I say it pleasantly. I say it the same way each time, and I do not raise my voice, and I do not explain twice. And I read contracts. Every single line. In residency, I sat through 8 months of practice management lectures on purchase agreements, restrictive covenants, and lender term sheets. Because a residency stipend of $61,200 a year does not clear $312,000 in debt, and the only way out I could see was to own something. By the summer of 2026, I had finished my residency, I had a job, and I had a plan I had not told a single member of my family about. Then my father called me about a wedding. Blythe got engaged in June at a rooftop bar in the short north, and my mother called me from the parking garage afterward crying so hard I thought somebody had died. The fiancé's name is Chandler Voss. He is 33, he sells commercial HVAC equipment for a distributor in Grove City, and he is not a bad man. I want to be fair to him, because a lot of what happened landed on him, and he did not deserve most of it. He is loud, he is generous in restaurants, and he genuinely adores my sister. His parents own a heating and cooling company in Springfield and had offered $20,000 toward the wedding, which in Pickaway County is an enormous amount of money and in my father's mind was a starting bid. The date was set for Saturday, October 17th. The asks came the way they always come. Small first, so you can't find the place to object. In late June it was, would I do a reading at the ceremony? In July it was, would I mind picking up the invitations from the printer in Columbus, since I was already up there? In early August my mother asked if I could help with the flowers, which turned out to mean paying the florist's deposit of $600. I paid it. I have paid a lot of $600s in my life. It is the price of not having a conversation. Then on Tuesday, September 8th, at 6:40 in the morning, my father called me while I was scraping frost off nothing, standing in my kitchen in Grove City with a coffee I hadn't drunk yet. He did not ask how I was. He said he'd been going through the numbers. Your sister's wedding comes to $58,000, he said. You're the one with the doctor money. You'll cover it. I asked him to say the number again. He said it again, slower, like I was the one being difficult. $58,000. The Ironworks. Schweitzer's Catering. A dress from a boutique on Grandview Avenue. A photographer, a videographer, a band out of Cincinnati, a rented arch, 220 chairs with covers. I told him I was 3 months out of residency, that I made an associate salary, and that I owed $312,000. You owe that because I signed for it, he said. There it was. Dad, you co-signing doesn't make it your money. It makes you liable if I don't pay. I've never missed a payment. I signed my name, he said. That name is on it. And if you want to keep playing doctor down there in Grove City, you do well to remember there's still a fund in this family with your name on it, and I can take it apart at the knees whenever I feel like it. Family signs for family, Francis. Then he hung up because he had said the sentence he'd called to say. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the sink. There is a specific feeling I have had maybe 6 times in my life, where the fear arrives first and about 4 seconds later something cold and useful arrives behind it. The cold thing is the part of me that reads contracts. I did not call him back. I did not call my mother. I went to work and I bonded brackets on a 13-year-old named Sierra who cried about the color of her ligatures, and I told her, pleasantly, no. 2 days later, an email arrived that I have read more times than any other document in my life. It came at 2:19 in the afternoon from Priscilla Okonjo, events manager at the Ironworks, and it opened, Dr. Kilbane, so nice to be working with you. She said my father had listed me as the responsible party on the event agreement, that the balance was coming due, and that she needed my signature on the guarantor line before she could release the floor plan to the caterer. She attached the contract as a PDF. I opened it in the parking lot behind my office and read all 9 pages on a phone screen. Booking date, March 3, 2026. Deposit paid, $9,600, marked unrefundable in the same size type as everything else, which is how those clauses always look right up until they matter. Total contract, $41,000. Balance due, $31,400, payable by certified funds no later than 14 days prior to the event date. A liquidated damages clause, cancellation inside 60 days, or failure to remit the balance, and the full contract amount is owed regardless. And on page 9, under the signature block, a line labeled Responsible Party/Guarantor. My name was printed on it. Francis A. Kilbane, DDS, in my father's block capitals, the same capitals he used on the outside of the fuse box and on the lid of every storage bin in the garage. My cell phone number underneath it. The signature line beside it was blank. He had not forged anything. He had done something I found colder. He had written my name where money goes and told a stranger I would sign it later, because in his mind the signing was a formality and the deciding had already happened without me in the room. I did not reply to Priscilla that day. 5 days later I drove down to Belcross to fold programs. I want to be honest about why I went. Part of it was that I still wanted to see whether the whole thing could be talked through at a kitchen table. Part of it was that I am 31 years old and my father can still make me get in a car. And part of it, the part one only admitted later, was that I wanted to see the paperwork with my own eyes. The house on Sawmill Road had been staged like a showroom. Ivory tool wound through the porch rail. A rented steamer in the hallway. 14 boxes of favors stacked in the front room, little tins of Buckeye candy with B and C on the lid in gold. My mother met me at the door with her hair freshly colored and hugged me for about a second and a half. "You came," she said. "Good. There's 180 programs and they all have to be folded in thirds, not halves." Blythe was very clear. Blythe was on the phone in the kitchen when I came through, arguing with somebody about a linen color called oatmeal. She held up one finger without looking at me. When she hung up, she hugged me the way you hug a coworker at a retirement party. "Frankie. Thank God. Mom folds them crooked." We folded programs at the dining room table for 3 hours. Everett came in around 8, 19 years old, taking 2 classes at Columbus State and working at the Kroger in Circleville, wearing the same hooded sweatshirt he'd worn since he was 16. He sat down and folded with us without being asked, which is the whole of Everett's personality. At about 9:15, he got up to get a pop and came back with a rubber-banded stack off the hall table. "Mail's been piling up," he said. "Some of it's yours. They never changed your address." He set it in front of me. 6 envelopes. 2 were from my dental association. One was a sample ballot for a precinct I hadn't voted in since 2013. And one was a windowed envelope with the Ohio 529 logo in the corner, addressed to Francis A. Kilbane at Sawmill Road. I want to slow down here, because I have gone over this in my head many times. My hands were dry from the paper. I remember that. I remember my thumb tearing the flap crooked and taking a piece of the letter with it. The dining room light is one of those brass fixtures with 5 bulbs and 2 of them were out, so the paper was yellowish under it, and I had to turn it toward the window to read the small type. The first page was headed Notice of Change of Designated Beneficiary. It said that the account owner had submitted a request, that the request had been processed effective August 21, 2026, and that the designated beneficiary of account number ending in 4471 had been changed from Francis A. Kilbane to Blythe R. Kilbane. It noted, in a paragraph of gray text, that a change of beneficiary to a member of the family of the former beneficiary is generally not a taxable event. The second page was a transaction confirmation. A full distribution of $63,400, processed August 26, 2026, paid by electronic transfer to the account owner. $63,400. Grandma Ada's $40 a month, and the tin above the stove, and the statements folded into thirds with the dates written on the outside in pencil. Gone 12 days before he called me to demand $58,000, which meant that when he called me and threatened to take the fund apart at the knees, the fund had already been in his checking account for a week and a half. He hadn't been threatening. He'd been covering. I did not make a sound. My sister was 6 feet away, on the phone again, saying the word oatmeal. My mother was in the kitchen running the steamer. I put the 2 pages face down under the program stack, and I folded 11 more programs in thirds, and then I said I needed some air. I went out to the driveway, and I photographed both pages against the hood of my car under the porch light, holding my phone in both hands so the text would be sharp, and I checked each photo to make sure the account number and the dates were legible. It was 9:42. I know because the time is printed on the photos, and those timestamps mattered later. Then I went back inside, and because I was already looking, I saw the rest of it. The sideboard in the dining room is where mail goes to die in that house. There was a stack there squared against the corner, sitting inside an old water ring in the finish. On top was an envelope from a bank in Columbus. It was open. The letter was folded back over itself so the header was face up, and I read it from where I stood without touching it. It was a notice of adverse action, dated August 12, 2026. A home equity line of credit application denied. The reasons were printed in a little bulleted box, the way they have to be by law: debt-to-income ratio too high, and insufficient equity in the collateral property. I stood there and did the arithmetic and felt something in my chest go very quiet. He had gone to the bank in August to borrow against the house to pay for the wedding, and the bank had said no. And one of the reasons the bank had said no, one of the reasons his debt-to-income ratio was too high, was that $148,000 of my dental school loans were sitting on his credit report as his obligation. Because that is what a cosigner is. Not a sponsor. Not an owner. A second person who owes the whole thing. The signature he had been holding over my head for 5 years had been quietly holding him under the water the entire time. He got turned down on August 12th. He changed the beneficiary on August 21st. He emptied it on August 26th. He called me on September 8th. I didn't touch that stack. I did not photograph it. I stepped back, and I checked that the corner of the envelope still sat exactly on the edge of the water ring the way I'd found it, and I went back to the table and folded programs until 11. That night I lay in my childhood bedroom, on a mattress that still smelled like the same cedar closet, under a shelf that held Blythe's dance trophies, because they'd run out of room in her room in 2009 and never moved them. And I made a list on my phone. Not a plan yet. A list of things I did not know for certain. The next morning I left at 7 and pulled into the lot of a Dairy Queen on Route 23 and started making calls. At 8:04 I called Ohio's 529 plan. The woman was kind and completely unhelpful, which is exactly correct. She confirmed my name and my social, and she confirmed that I was not currently a designated beneficiary on any account, and she told me she could not discuss an account I was not the owner of. I asked her one question: was the letter I received genuine, and had it been generated by their system? She said yes, that notices of beneficiary change are sent to the removed beneficiary of record at the address on file. That was all I needed. At 8:31 I called Winifred Baumgartner, the CPA in Columbus who had done my taxes for 3 years and who had once told me, cheerfully, that she found other people's financial disasters relaxing. I read her both pages. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Oh, Frankie, he's going to owe on that." She walked me through it twice, and I wrote it down twice. Changing the beneficiary from me to my sister, by itself, is a non-event. Siblings are members of the family under the rules, and the plan itself had told me so in gray type. The withdrawal is a different animal. A distribution from a 529 is only tax-free to the extent it is used for qualified education expenses, tuition, fees, books, room and board within limits. A wedding at a converted tool and die plant is not on that list and has never been on that list. So the distribution was non-qualified. That meant the earnings portion of it, not the contributions, the growth, was ordinary taxable income. Of the $63,400, roughly $21,800 was earnings. On top of the income tax, the federal government adds an additional 10% penalty on that earnings portion, $2,180. And then Ohio. Ohio gives residents a state income tax deduction for contributions to its own 529 plan, up to $4,000 per beneficiary per year, with the unused portion carried forward. Grandma Ada had taken that deduction for years, and after 2019 so had he, on the contributions he made in the 2 years he actually made any. When you pull the money out for something that isn't education, the state takes that deduction back. It gets added back to Ohio taxable income. And the last part, the part Winifred said slowly so I would hear it, the 1099Q reporting the distribution is issued to whoever received the money. The check went to the account owner. Not to my sister. Not to a school. To Roland Kilbane, social security number and all, and it would land in his mailbox in January. He's built himself a tax bill, she said. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,000, once you stack federal, penalty, and the Ohio add-back. And he spent the money in August. At 9:15, I called Keystone Educational Finance, the private lender that holds my cosign loans, and I got a young man named Deshaun in the cosigner department, and I asked him 4 questions in a row and made him answer each one on a recorded line. Can a cosigner withdraw his signature from an existing loan? No. Can a cosigner accelerate the loan or demand that the balance be paid immediately? No. A cosigner has no rights against the borrower under the note. He has obligations. Can a cosigner access the borrower's account, change the payment method, or stop disbursement of funds already disbursed in 2021 through 2025? No. Last question. What does it take to get him off? Deshaun told me the cosigner release requirements, and I wrote them on the back of a Dairy Queen napkin. 36 consecutive on-time full principal and interest payments. Proof of graduation. A credit and income review of the borrower alone. And this is the part that had kept the door shut on me for years. Months spent in residency deferment or on interest-only payments do not count toward the 36. I had made 14 qualifying payments. I was 2.5 years from a release. There's another way, Deshaun said, and he wasn't supposed to tell me, and he told me anyway. You refinance with somebody else. New loan, your name only. It pays us off. The old note's gone and so is he. I asked for all of it in writing. He said the letter would take 7 to 10 business days. I sat in a Dairy Queen parking lot on Route 23 with a napkin on my knee and I understood, finally and completely, what I was holding. My father had built a wedding on top of my grandmother's money and my signature and a lie about what a cosigner can do. Every single piece of it was load-bearing. And not one piece of it was strong. Let me pause here for a second, because I know some of you are sitting very still right now. If you have ever had somebody in your family treat your name, your signature, or your future as an asset on their balance sheet, drop the word signed in the comments. Just that one word. I read them and I want to know how many of us there are. All right, back to the story. Because I did the one thing my father had never once, in 31 years, seen me do. I told nobody. Not my mother. Not Aunt Connie. Not Everett. Not my sister. And I went and got a loan of my own. Here's the thing my family did not know about my summer. In July, I had gone to work as an associate for Dr. Alma Brightbill, who opened a 2-chair orthodontic office on Broadway in Grove City in 1989 and had been threatening to retire since 2019. She is 66, she wears reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she has straightened the teeth of 3 generations of the same families. Her recall list has 1,140 active patients on it. In May she asked me if I wanted to buy it. The price was $412,000, goodwill, equipment, the accounts receivable, the 2 chairs, the panoramic unit, and 37 years of a small town trusting one woman with its children's faces. I had no down payment. I had $9,140 in savings and a residency stipend that had ended in June. That matters less than you would think, and it surprises everybody outside my profession. Practice lenders finance dentists at 100% of the purchase price, no money down, because dentists almost never default on a practice loan. The bank is not betting on my savings account. It is betting on the recall list. I had been in underwriting since July 14th with a lender named Gerald Tomczak in a bank office on Riverside Drive in Columbus, who has done this for 19 years and asked me one personal question in 4 months, whether I plan to keep Dr. Brightbill's Saturday hours. I said yes. He wrote it down. So on the morning of September 14th, after the Dairy Queen and the napkin, I did not call my father. I called Gerald. I told him exactly what had happened, all of it in order, because the fastest way to lose a lender is to let him find something out from a credit report instead of from you. I told him about the cosign note. I told him I intended to refinance it into my own name before we closed, and I asked him whether that would blow up my practice loan. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Doctor, that's the same debt either way. It's on your report today, and it'll be on your report after. What changes is whose report it's on besides yours." And then he said, "Do it in that order. Refinance first, close second. Send me the payoff letter when you've got it." I applied to a refinance lender called Ridgeline on September 14th, and I uploaded 41 documents in one sitting. 2 years of tax returns. My dental school diploma. My Ohio license. My signed associate employment agreement with Dr. Brightbill, and then, on September 18th, the fully executed practice purchase agreement, which is the document that turned me from a resident with a stipend into a borrower with a business. That agreement is why it worked. Refinance lenders will not take a cosigner off a note just because you ask. They will not do it because your father is unpleasant. They do it because a new lender is willing to lend to you a loan, which requires proof that you can service the debt alone. I could not have done this in March. I could not have done it in June. I could do it in September because I had a signed contract to buy a business. Approval came September 25th. $148,000, 10-year term, 5.89%, one borrower. The payoff funded on October 2nd. It posted at Keystone Educational Finance on Monday, October 5th, at 11:16 in the morning. I watched the balance go to zero on my phone in the parking lot behind the office between a bonding appointment and a debond, and then I went back in and put brackets on a 14-year-old. The letter from Keystone had come on October 1st, for pages, signed by a compliance officer in Wilmington. It stated in plain language what Deshawn had told me on the phone, that a cosigner is jointly and severally liable for the full balance, that a cosigner has no right to withdraw his signature, no right to accelerate the loan, no right to demand payment from the borrower, and no access to or authority over the borrower's account. I had asked for that letter because I knew what would happen if I simply told my father he was wrong. He would say I was making it up. Men like my father do not lose arguments to their daughters. They lose them to letterhead. On October 9th, I closed on Brightbill Orthodontics. Dr. Alma handed me 2 keys on a paper tag with the word Broadway written on it in ballpoint, and then she cried, and then she went to Florida. On October 6th, 3 days before the closing, one day after the payoff posted, I sent my father an email. It was 5 sentences. I have it in front of me. Dad, I will not be signing the guarantee at the ironworks, and I am not paying for Blythe's wedding. I've told Priscilla Okonjo the same thing in writing. Please make other arrangements now, while there is still time. I love you, and I am not doing this. He answered in 22 minutes. 4 words. You'll do what's right. That is the whole reason I can tell this story without flinching. I told him. In writing. 11 days out, with a paper trail, while every one of those problems was still fixable. He read it and decided that my no was a mood. I had also written to Priscilla Okonjo on October 6th, and I had asked her one question in writing so that her answer would exist in writing. Was I bound by the agreement in any way? Her reply came the next morning, and it was 2 lines. The guarantor line was unsigned. An unsigned guarantee binds no one. The contracting party on the agreement was Roland Kilbane, individually. The last thing I did was call Aunt Connie. I drove to Belcross on Sunday the 11th and sat on her screened porch, and I showed her the 2 pages from the 529 plan and nothing else. She read them twice. She is a woman who spent 34 years taking splinters out of children and calling parents about things they did not want to hear, and her face did not move at all. Then she said, that was Ada's. It was. He was the successor on that account because Ada trusted him to be a decent man about it. She folded the pages along the crease I had made. Francis, what do you want to have happen? I told her the truth. I said I did not want anything to happen. I said I wanted to be able to sit at a table on Friday night and not be handed a pen, and that I did not believe that was going to be possible, and that if it wasn't, I wanted one person in that room who had been at the spelling bee. "I'll be there," she said. "Sit me next to you." I asked Winifred Baumgartner for one more thing, and it was not for me. She wrote a one-page memo, no names, just numbers, laying out what a non-qualified distribution of $63,400 does to a tax return, and what an IRS installment agreement looks like if you cannot pay in April. She dated it October 8th and kept her phone on Friday evening. I put 6 documents in a manila folder in this order: the Keystone letter, the payoff confirmation, page 9 of the Ironworks agreement, the printout of my October 6th email and his forward reply, the 529 letters, and Winifred's memo. Then I practiced 2 sentences in my car, out loud, in the parking lot of a Kroger in Grove City, until I could say them at a normal volume. The rehearsal dinner was Friday, October 16th at the Ironworks, because my mother had decided it saved everyone a trip. I got there at 6:40. Blythe had rented the whole main floor, which is the shop floor of the plant where my father ran second shift for 19 years. The crane rails still bolted overhead, the brick sandblasted down to orange, 200 filament bulbs strung between the rails on black cord, long farm tables in 3 rows, mason jars of white spray roses. 61 people, which is a lot of people for a rehearsal dinner and exactly the right number for what my father wanted the evening to be. Aunt Connie was already in her seat at table 3 on the aisle. I sat beside her with my back to the brick so I could see the door. Everett sat across from us in a borrowed sport coat with the sleeves too short. At table 1, up by the head, Chandler's parents, Dwight and Charmaine Voss, who had driven down from Springfield in a truck with their company's logo on the door. Chandler's mother had brought a box gift and set it under the table because she wasn't sure where the gift table was. Blythe was radiant. I want that on the record. My sister was genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy that night, in a white dress that was not the dress, laughing with her bridesmaids by the bar, and there was a stretch of about 20 minutes where I thought maybe nothing would happen at all. At 7:20 my father stood up and tapped a glass with a butter knife. He is a good speaker. He was a shift supervisor and a township trustee, and he knows how to hold a room. He talked about the plant. He talked about running second shift under those exact rails and never once imagining he'd see his daughter married under them. People made the sound people make. He talked about family being the only thing that lasts. My mother's chin trembled on cue. Then he said, "And I want to say something about my other daughter." 59 heads turned. I set my fork down. "Frances went off and became a doctor," he said, warm as anything. "We're all proud. And Frances has decided to stand behind her sister's day." He reached under his chair and came up with a green folder. I watched him walk the length of table 2 with it. He set it down beside my plate, squared it with 2 fingers, and laid a pen on top of it, and he did it smiling, with 61 people watching, because he had run this play his entire life, and it had never once failed. The top document was the Ironworks guarantee, page 9, my name printed on the line. Underneath, it was a 1-page promissory note, typed by somebody at a kitchen table, in which Frances A. Kilbane agreed to pay Roland Kilbane $58,000. "Go ahead, sweetheart," he said. I did not touch the pen. "I'm not going to sign this, Dad." He kept smiling for about 2 seconds, which is how long it took the sentence to arrive. "Frances, I emailed you about this on the 6th. You have it." I said I wouldn't sign, and I meant it. "Family signs for family," he said, louder, to the room now, not to me. At 7:34 Priscilla Okonjo came out from behind the bar. I want to be clear that she was not part of anything. She is a woman doing a job, in a black blazer, with a leather folio, and she had been waiting all evening for a moment that was never going to be a good one. She bent toward my father and said something quietly, and he waved his hand, and she said it again, not quietly. "Mr. Kilbane, the balance was due by certified funds on October 3rd. It's $31,400. I can't put stuff on the floor tomorrow morning without it." The room went down to about half volume. My father took out his wallet and handed her a credit card, which was, I think, the most confident thing he did all night. She walked it to the terminal at the end of the bar. Everybody watched her walk. She came back and told him, in a voice pitched for one person and heard by 40, that it had declined. He gave her a second card. He said something about the bank flagging travel. That one declined too. And then Dwayne Schweitzer came out from behind the carving station in his apron, holding a phone with the contract open on it, and said he was sorry, and that his agreement called for the $18,750 balance before service, and that he had 6 employees scheduled at 5 a.m. My father turned around and looked at me down the length of 2 tables. "You own a practice now," he said. "Don't you?" That was how I found out he'd known for about a week. Small county. Dr. Brightbill's sign had gone up with my name on it on the 12th. "I do," I said. "Then you can fix this." I stood up. I did not raise my voice, because I have never once had to raise my voice to a 13-year-old, and I was not going to start with my father. "Dad, I'm going to say some true things, and then I'm going to leave. You can stop me any time by sitting down." He didn't sit down. I opened the manila folder. This is a letter from Keystone Educational Finance, dated October 1st. It says a cosigner is fully liable for the loan. It says a cosigner cannot withdraw his signature. It cannot be accelerated by a cosigner. A cosigner cannot demand payment from the borrower and cannot touch the borrower's account. Every threat you have made to me since 2021 was a thing you were never able to do. This is the payoff confirmation. On October 5th, at 11:16 in the morning, that loan was paid in full and closed. I refinanced it into my own name alone 11 days ago. Your name came off my debt on Monday of last week. You have not been my cosigner for 11 days and nobody told you, because you never once asked me a question about it. Somebody at table 4 said, "Oh," out loud. "This is page 9 of the agreement with this venue. My name is printed on the guarantor line in your handwriting. The signature line is blank. I never signed it." Ms. Okonjo confirmed to me in writing on October 7th that an unsigned guarantee binds no one and that the contracting party on this agreement is you, individually. Priscilla Okonjo, to her credit, did not look away. She said, "That's correct." "And this," I said, "is the email I sent you on October 6th at 4:52 in the afternoon, telling you I would not sign and asking you to make other arrangements while there was still time. And this is your answer, sent 22 minutes later. For words. You'll do what's right." My father's face had gone a color I had never seen on it. "You've embarrassed this family," he said. "You didn't sign for me," I said. "You signed with me." That is not the same thing. Before I tell you the last part of what was in that folder, if you have ever been the person a family turns toward at exactly the moment their own plan collapses, invisible for 20 years and indispensable for 20 minutes, hit subscribe. There are more of us than anybody thinks. And then I took out the last 2 pages, and I made myself say it slowly, because my mother was in the room and she did not know. On August 12th, a bank in Columbus denied your home equity line. One of the reasons printed on the notice was your debt-to-income ratio. My loans were on your credit report as your debt, because that is what co-signing is. On August 21st, you changed the beneficiary of Grandma Ada's 529 account from me to Blythe. On August 26th, you took the entire balance out, $63,400, paid by transfer to yourself. And on September 8th, you called me at 6:40 in the morning and threatened to take that fund apart if I didn't pay for this wedding. It was already gone. You'd spent it. You were threatening me with a room you had already emptied. My mother said, "Roland." Just his name. That was all she said all night. Blythe had come up the aisle between the tables at some point and was standing about 8 feet away with her hands at her sides. "Whose money is my dress?" she said. Nobody answered her. "Frankie, whose money is my dress?" "Grandma's," I said. "And it was mine, and now it's a tent." My father put both hands on the back of a chair. And for a moment, I am not going to pretend this didn't happen. He was just a 63-year-old man in a rented room. "We're 40 days from losing that house," he said. "Do you understand that? 40 days. The room was completely silent. I felt the whole thing tilt toward him, the way it always had. Then he lifted his head and said, "And you'd let us." And there he was again. "I'm not your collateral," I said. I picked up Winifred's memo, and I walked it up the aisle and I put it in his hand, because I had promised myself I would do this in front of witnesses. That's from a CPA in Columbus. Her name and number are at the top. In January, you're going to get a 1,099Q for that distribution in your Social Security number. The earnings portion is taxable to you as income, there's a 10% federal penalty on top of it, and Ohio is going to take back the deduction you claimed on those contributions. She has time Monday at 9. I will pay for the appointment and for as many hours after it as you need, and she can set up an installment agreement so this doesn't take the house. Father Mulvaney has a mediator through the diocese. I'll pay for that too. That offer is real and it does not expire. He looked at the paper in his hand for about 3 seconds. Then he let it fall on the table and said, I don't need a bookkeeper. I need a daughter who acts like one. Okay, I said. I picked up my purse. Aunt Connie was already standing. At table 1, Dwight Voss got up. He is a quiet man with an HVAC company and a handshake like a vice, and he did not make a speech. He said, Roland, that money was for her school, and my father did not answer him, and Dwight said, Charmaine, get your coat. I heard later that the $20,000 the Vosses had committed did not move the next morning, and that Chandler spent most of the night in the gravel lot on the phone with his father. Blythe went to the wedding anyway. I want to be accurate about that. She got married at 2 o'clock the next afternoon at St. Bede's with 38 people there, in the dress, and the reception was in the church basement with sheet cake and a playlist off somebody's phone. Because the ironworks locked its doors at 9:15 that Friday night and did not open them again for the Kilbanes. I left at 8:07. Everett followed me out to the gravel. He stood there with his hands in the pockets of a sport coat that didn't fit him and said the thing he'd been told to say all week. Dad says you always had to be the smartest one in the room. I know he does. Everett looked at the gravel for a while. He is 19, and he had been living in that house alone with them since I left, absorbing every dinner, and he had done the only thing a 19-year-old in that position knows how to do, which is repeat what he hears so nobody starts on him. Was it really Grandma's, he said. It was. He told Mom the account was closed out years ago. He told her a lot of things. He started to cry, which I had not been prepared for, and then he apologized, and then he apologized for apologizing. Here is what I told him, and here is where I put the line. I told him I was not angry with him and never had been. I told him that starting in January I would pay his tuition at Columbus State, $2,388 a semester, and that I would pay it directly to the bursar's office in his student ID number. And that no dollar of it would ever pass through anybody's checking account but the school's. I told him he could call me at any hour about anything. And I told him I would never co-sign anything for him. Not a car, not an apartment, not a phone. Not because I don't trust him. Because I've watched what his signature does to people in our family, and I would rather he be a little inconvenienced at 22 than owned at 31. He said that was fair. He calls me on Sundays. I want to be careful about how I tell the rest, because I did not do any of it. The ironworks sent the balance to collections in December. My father had signed that agreement personally, in March, with a liquidated damages clause on page 7 that he had not read. And in March of 2027, a magistrate in Pickaway County entered a judgment against him for $31,400 plus costs. Schweitzer's kept its deposit, which the contract entitled them to, and never cooked a thing. The 1,099Q arrived in January, exactly as Winifred said it would, with his name and social security number on it, and $63,400 in box 1. He did not call her. He took it to a storefront tax office in a strip mall on Route 23, and they got the federal part roughly right and missed the Ohio piece entirely, so the state's recapture of the deductions came at him in a separate letter in June, which is the worst possible way to receive a number. They listed the house on Sawmill Road in May of 2027 and sold it in July for $219,000. They rent a 2-bedroom in Circleville now, near the fairgrounds. The bank had already told him, on August 12, 2026, that this was where the arithmetic went. He treated that letter as a temporary inconvenience and me as a permanent resource, and he had it exactly backwards. He did not file for township trustee again in November. Nobody made him not file. It is a county of 58,000 people, and the rehearsal dinner had 61 witnesses, and that is simply how a small place works. Not one of those things happened because of anything I did after 8:07 that Friday night. I never called a bank. I never called the venue back. I never posted a word online, and I have never told this story to anybody in that county. I told Aunt Connie once that I felt sick watching it happen, and she said, "Francis, you didn't push him. You just quit standing under him." The offer stayed open. I emailed Winifred's number to my father again in April of 2027, when I knew the letters would be coming, with one line, "Still paid for. Still available." He did not answer. That is his right. A real offer has to include the right to refuse it, or it isn't an offer, it's a leash. My mother texts twice a year, at Christmas and on my birthday. I answer both. I answer them the way I'd answer a patient's parent, pleasantly, factually, and without opening a door I'd have to close again. Blythe texted me in February of 2027. It said, "I'm sorry about Grandma's money. I met her for dinner in Columbus in March, once, at a place on High Street that I chose. She is still married. She works at a hotel downtown and she is very good at it. We talked for 2 hours and she never once asked me for anything, and I don't know yet what we are, and I have decided that not knowing is allowed. There will not be money. She knows that. She asked me at the end, in the parking garage, whether the answer would ever change, and I told her the truth, which is that I love her, and the answer is no. My life is smaller than it used to sound and better than it has ever been. Brightville Orthodontics has 3 chairs now. We took out the file wall and put the third one where the paper charts used to live. The recall list was at 1,140 when Dr. Alma handed me the keys, and last month it crossed 1,610. I kept her Saturday hours. On Buckeye Saturdays, we run 7 to 11 in the morning so the whole county can be home by kickoff, and my assistants wear scarlet scrub tops, and the waiting room television plays the pregame with the sound off. Once a year, off the free dental screening at the Pickaway County Fair, I take 3 children into full treatment at no charge. 2 years of appointments, brackets, wire changes, retainers, all of it. There is no form and no announcement. I call the mother myself. The program does not have a name on any wall, but it has one in my office, and the name is Ada. Grandma's blue coffee tin sits on the shelf in my sterilization room, above the autoclave, where I can see it from the hallway. I keep appointment cards in it. It has held that family's hopes for education one way or another for 31 years, and now it is the only place in Ohio where nobody can take the money out of it, because it isn't money anymore. It's teeth. I still hear his sentence sometimes. Family signs for family. He said it to me the night he co-signed, and he said it across 2 rows of farm tables in front of 61 people, and both times he meant the same thing, which is that my name belonged to him. He was right that a signature is a serious thing. That is the only part he ever got right. He signed for me in 2021, and he never once read what he was signing, and then he printed my name on a venue contract without asking, and then he signed away my grandmother's account with his own hand on August 21st. Every catastrophe in this story arrived through a document my father signed. Not one of them arrived through a document I signed. Family signs for family. He was the only one in that house who ever did. That's my story. A blue coffee tin, a blank signature line, and 2 keys on a paper tag that says Broadway. You are not the collateral that secures somebody else's life. You are allowed to be a whole person to the people who made you, and if they will only take you as a resource, then the kindest thing you can do for both of you is to stop being available at the exact moment they are counting on you most. If this story reached something in you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments what you would have done when that pen came down beside your plate. Subscribe to my channel, because next week I am telling you about a woman whose mother-in-law read her will out loud at Thanksgiving to a table of 22 people, and about the single line in it that nobody expected the daughter-in-law to already know by heart. Thank you for sitting with me. Take care of yourself and be careful whose name you let them put on a line.